all around the world. Roads, bridges, railways, waterways, tunnels, and airports. In one way or another, extreme. From the crazy to the deadly, the magnificent to the terrifying. Incredible engineering and astonishing human stories. These are the world's most extreme. From Central America's man-made canals to the ferocious seas of the Southern Ocean. The world's waters are vital to life on Earth as we know it.
Over 95% of the goods we use are transported in some way by waterways.
An arena for trailblazers, drug cartels, adventurers, and adrenaline junkies. They force us to put our lives at risk and construct colossal engineering marvels.
It's such a big job, an ambitious job.
But wherever you go, the world's seas and rivers remind us of one thing: their power to change our lives.
1が動き始まったあたりからもう私の心はもうパニック状態になって。
Get your life jackets at the ready for the 10 most extreme waters on the planet. At number 10, in the heart of Africa, the wild Congo River.
The Congo River is one of the world's biggest rivers. In fact, it's its second biggest by volume after the Amazon.
It's Africa's most powerful river, and at its core, the world's biggest and deadliest rapids, the Inga Falls. They're known as the gates of hell, a terrifying, churning mass of extreme white water with whirlpools the size of boxing rings.
It's vast, unexplored, and really quite treacherous.
The impenetrable rapids block the river. In centuries of exploration, no one has crossed them and lived to tell the tale. In October 2011, after 6 years of preparation, Steve Fisher traveled to the Democratic Republic of Congo for the challenge of a lifetime.
I've been a professional kayaker now for most of my life. We always look for the bigger goal.
His goal was to become the first to ever paddle down the Congo's Inga Falls.
I've always known about these rapids, but considered them to be impossible.
Now, it was time for Steve and his extreme team of kayakers to hit the Congo. The plan, to kayak the whole way down 15 miles of monstrous rapids.
You see these massive whirlpools forming, and those were the main obstacles we had to avoid. Unexpectedly, a whirlpool came up behind me and sucked me under.
Steve was trapped. He struggled for over a minute to free himself from his kayak.
That was an extremely terrifying moment and the only time that I thought I was going to die.
Steve's both upside down. Where is he?
I was underwater. I came out of my kayak.
I saw his paddleboat.
I'm back on the surface. I'm totally out of breath. My head's pounding, and my team comes paddling up to me.
You all right?
Steve was lucky to be alive.
I was as physically beaten down as you can possibly be. The guys literally had to drag me to shore. It made me realize that I don't want to drown in a kayak, and that we need to treat this with the utmost respect.
The Congo had given him an almighty scare. But just a day later, Steve was back in the kayak, ready to tackle the heart of the rapids.
Here we come.
Every minute, 50 million cubic feet of water flows over these sharp rocks. That's 10 Olympic swimming pools every second.
This river was so much bigger than us, and we were merely hanging on by a thread.
The elite kayakers were battered, bruised, and exhausted. But after 4 days on the river, they had made it through.
What we had accomplished could never be taken away from us.
Steve and his friends were the first ever to survive the Congo's gates of hell.
I was relieved rather than victorious. There was no sense of we conquered this river. There was a humbling sense of having been let through.
This time, the kayakers escaped with their lives. But they rode their luck. Next time, the Congo may not be so forgiving. At number 9, it's the terrifying flash floods of Colorado's mountain rivers. A placid Rocky Mountain river, 16 miles northwest of Denver, that's hiding a deadly secret. It has the power to wipe away whole houses. Back in 1976, Colorado was hit by heavy thunderstorms. Flash floods took the lives of 143 people.
I've never in my life experienced anything like that.
They called it the storm of the century, a freak event. No one thought it would happen again. But Mother Nature had other ideas. In early autumn 2013, a huge storm dumped 6 months' worth of rain on Colorado in just 4 days. Emergency workers were stretched to their limits as they battled flash floods across the state.
It was pretty remarkable in just the amount of rain we had and how fast it came.
Runoff from the mountains rapidly transformed small rivers into raging monsters.
Severe thunderstorms can dump up to 12 inches of rain over a matter of hours, and that's all it takes.
The mountain canyons acted like funnels, turning the freak rainfall into flash floods. Just like in 1976, 20-foot high walls of water came crashing down the canyon at 4,000 cubic feet per second. An irresistible force of nature, destroying everything in its path.
It washed away huge roadways. Entire communities were taken out.
The rain was relentless, and then, suddenly, the worst happened. A flooding creek became so fierce that it smashed a highway bridge. Cars plunged into the water below. Firefighters Rob Williams and John Cook were quickly on the scene.
We saw a victim waving at us, and then we knew that he was a confirmed rescue. John and I went over on the raft, and we were controlled by 2 teams on the shores with ropes. We were able to pull that first victim out on the boat.
Fighting the raging torrent, Rob and John succeeded in getting the driver to safety. But the emergency wasn't over yet. Another driver was still missing.
We didn't know if that person had flushed out and downriver and had gotten out. Our first initial mission was to go out and investigate, see if there was anybody inside the vehicle.
I crawled up on the vehicle.
Once we heard some sort of life from inside the vehicle, it definitely changed our game plan. We took a little bit more risk at that point.
Rob and John had to act fast.
We knew that if there's someone in there, we'll put our lives on the line to save them and pull them out. We took the chain from a tow truck and pulled it up right side.
The fierce current made it near impossible to pull the car the right way up.
Not stable, Rob. Not stable.
We were able to break the window, and that's when the hand came out. Time was really important, and we had a short window to get him out. You see that moment slip away when you realize, I may have just seen this man for the last time, or his last chance to get out.
Seconds felt like hours. At last, the firefighters were able to reach inside and unlock the door.
When we were able to get that door open and able to see him come out again, very cold and hypothermic, but relatively okay, it was a huge relief.
For Roy Ortiz, it was the end of a 2-hour ordeal.
I fight for my life. I want to survive. I don't want to die.
2 months later, Roy is paying a visit to Rob and John's fire station.
Hi, Mr. John.
Hey.
Nice to see you again, guys.
This is the first time Roy has had the chance to thank his rescuers for saving his life.
Same too.
We're so thankful that you're alive in there, that it's such a great conclusion. I mean, we hoped that you were in there okay, but when we heard that knocking under there, we're just so excited to see you, and your hand came out of that window. It was in your words, it was a miracle. So
God
it's
bless
so
you.
great. Yeah, it's so great
God
to
bless
meet
you guys. Thank you so much.
Roy was one of the lucky ones. Others were less fortunate. Colorado's 2013 floods claimed 8 lives and destroyed over $1 billion worth of property. They said this was a 1-in-100-year storm, but it's happened twice now in just 37 years. In this mountain terrain, flash floods remain a constant threat. Coming up, off the coast of California, violent skirmishes in America's war on drugs. We've seen the power of devastating flash floods, but man-made waterways can also be extreme. Now, at number 8, we head to Central America for the 8th wonder of the modern world. Around the planet, we've built astonishing ways of moving ships over land. Mighty ancient aqueducts, huge water bridges, even an elevator for boats. And the mightiest of them all, the Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal has to be one of the most ambitious engineering projects in the history of humankind.
The 50-mile-long canal shaves 8,000 miles off the journey from the Atlantic to the Pacific.
It's the world's greatest shipping shortcut. It literally reduces the price of sneakers, televisions, and cars for everybody.
15,000 ships carrying 280 million tons of cargo squeeze through the canal every year. But there is a problem. The canal is running at near full capacity, and a traffic jam on this highway costs millions. Worse still, this 20th century marvel can't handle some 21st century ships. The current locks are 110 feet wide. Sounds big, but it's a tight fit for today's supertankers. And now they are building ships even wider. If nothing is done, the Panama Canal is in danger of becoming obsolete. Panama needs a bigger canal. The price tag is £3 billion. Construction teams are excavating 130 million tons of earth, creating vast new channels, and building 2 new gigantic lock systems at each entrance to the canal, 70 feet wider than the ones in use today, each as long as the Empire State Building is tall.
It will allow ships up to 180 feet wide and 1,400 feet long, which will double the amount of tonnage that can pass through the canal.
The expansion project, due for completion in 2015, will be a game changer. Once again, the world's mightiest ships will glide through the world's mightiest waterway. From the mightiest to the most criminal, at 7, California's Pacific coast. The golden beaches of Southern California. People come here to sunbathe, surf, and smuggle drugs. This stretch of water is a superhighway for drugs entering the US. Every year, 90,000 kilos of narcotics are seized in the waters off this coastline. The port of San Diego, just 20 miles from the United States border with Mexico. The US Coast Guard's mission is to stop smuggling in these coastal waters.
It's difficult. It's a large ocean. There's a lot of water out there to patrol.
With over 1,000 miles of coastline to protect, the US Coast Guards use helicopters to spot the gangs smuggling marijuana, cocaine, and crystal meth. But to catch the Mexican cartels, they have to hit the waves.
We're kind of the tip of the spear as far as interdiction goes. Even if we were having aircraft overhead, we still need a boat on scene.
Today's fast response crew are heading down to the Mexican border.
We patrol all the way down to the border, try to stay out of the Mexican territorial waters.
The border is just 20 miles down the coastline, a trip of just 30 minutes in these patrol boats.
We're down here at the border. You see the fence there. My job is to protect this border. And to tell you the truth, I don't care where they're coming from as long as they don't get into our waters.
This sea border, for which Mike is responsible, is under siege from resourceful drug cartels. The gangs are so sophisticated that they ferry the drugs up to America in homemade submersibles called narco subs. But for the final leg of the journey, they use speedy fishing boats, perfect for the quick dash along the Californian coast. In this high seas game of cat and mouse, the Coast Guard know that the drug gangs are out there. They just haven't found them yet.
When we get the call that something suspicious is going on, you want to get out as fast as you can.
The Coast Guard have to be careful. They know that lives are at risk.
We're always approaching a vessel as if they're armed. It's an extremely dangerous operation. Your senses have to become more aware.
The smugglers usually run, but the Coast Guard have the speed to give chase.
Once we get in position, we can go over the loud hailer, inform them we're United States Coast Guard.
The Coast Guards also carry automatic weapons.
We can do anything from warning shots and also disabling fire.
Shots to the engines stop any boat dead in the water. America's war to stop drugs entering from Mexico is relentless. But however many drugs they seize, more will make their way along the California coast. At number 6, the roughest seas in the world, the infamous Cape Horn. Here the Pacific, Atlantic and Southern Oceans collide at the tip of South America. The roaring oceans create the most ferocious seas known to man.
There is nowhere that compares in terms of the reliability of storms, dangerous seas, and making you seasick.
100-foot waves and hurricane-strength winds. You have to have nerves of steel to tackle these waters.
It's rough, it's dangerous, it's terrifying. And believe me, it's not much fun.
The 6th of January 2009. Veteran yachtsman Jean Le Cam was approaching Cape Horn in 3rd position in the Vendée Globe solo round-the-world race. This unique stretch of water is a deadly cocktail of storms, complex currents, and stray icebergs. Rounding the Horn is a nightmare for even the best of sailors, as Le Cam was about to find out.
Ça se passe en quelques secondes, mais on va dire j'ai dû heurter quelque chose.
The boat struck something, probably a small iceberg, and capsized.
Donc là c'est l'instinct de survie qui gagne.
Le Cam set off an emergency signal and sheltered in a pocket of air at the front of his boat. Luckily, fellow competitors received his call and raced to the rescue. When they approached his boat 16 hours later, they had no idea if Le Cam was alive.
On peut enlever, et donc j'avais ouvert un passe-coque pour faire avec un petit drapeau pour dire que j'étais vivant à l'intérieur.
Le Cam then had to swim out and cling on to the rudder as Cape Horn's stormy waves slammed the boat. 3 attempts failed. Then his rescuers were able to throw him a rope and pull him to safety. And Le Cam's ordeal with Cape Horn's terrifying seas was over.
Voilà, c'est une période, c'est une histoire de marin.
From the roughest seas to the world's hardest river. At number 5, we're off to Canada's Pacific coast. This is the Fraser. A river that makes you work hard for your buck.
The tides and the currents get pretty extreme.
This mighty river is a timber superhighway running from the Rockies to the port of Vancouver. It's the only road big enough to carry huge quantities of wood from the mountain forests to the sawmills.
You can have up to 20,000 logs in a tow.
But sometimes the river bites back.
Whenever you mix unpredictable weather and currents with enormous towing loads and workboats, there's going to be danger.
It's an early morning in the dead of winter. The Fraser River is at high tide. Tugboat captain Curtis Mackenzie has been working these waters since high school. Today, Curtis is towing 20,000 logs through the swells to downtown Vancouver.
When you're towing barges or logs, it gives you quite a challenge.
His huge load, called a tow, is the length of 4 football pitches. It dwarfs the load of any road truck and adds up to £500,000 worth of prime timber.
A full tow can stretch out for anywhere a quarter mile to half a mile long.
But with the huge scale comes huge risk. One mistake can cost thousands of pounds. 9 hours into his journey, Curtis faces the challenge of getting his huge tow through the Patelo Bridge.
If you're going to a bridge, you have to be on your game. The tow can do 3 different directions all at once.
The river's constantly changing currents and tides are snaking the tow, threatening to break it apart.
You really do have to pay attention to what you're doing.
It takes Curtis's years of experience to keep the tow together.
If your tow breaks, it can take days and days to get everything put back together.
To keep the logs in order, you need to get out of the boat and onto the water. Meet Gordon Foss. His job is as hardcore as it gets.
I gotta be ready if something goes wrong, which it does quite often. I just ready to fix it.
The Fraser is trying to pull the logs apart, and it's a constant struggle to keep them together.
Like getting paid to go to the gym.
Gordon spots a problem with one of the outer logs.
We gotta put a preventer on the stick here. It's cracked on the end.
He uses a metal cable to stop the log from breaking loose. Gordon skips over the moving logs as they are pulled downriver. The cables and chains stop them spinning, but it's still an extreme game of hopscotch.
Your cork boots can pick up bark and stuff, so you'll slip on that, almost like you're on ice.
Slip, and the risks are clear.
In the wintertime, the water, it gets real cold.
It's a hazard that comes with the job.
You can fall in the water 10, 20 times a day. You're usually out pretty quick.
Mighty currents and freezing water, all part of grinding out a living on the world's hardest working river. Next up, we're off to Italy, where a lagoon is trying to drown a city. In Canada, we had the world's hardest working river. Now at number 4, a lagoon that appears destined to drown a global icon. In Britain, we are now all too aware of the dangers that rivers and seas pose to our homes. From coastal erosion in Yorkshire to southern England's devastating floods. But in Italy, a whole city is at risk. Venice. This enchanting city is a mecca for tourists. But you'd better get there quick. Because if nothing is done, Venice is in deep water. The City of Water sits just inches above the Venetian lagoon. But every now and then, high tides from the outside Adriatic Sea can flood into the lagoon. And before you know it, Venice's historic squares and narrow streets are submerged in water.
Oggi per fortuna siamo un po' salvati, ma ieri è proprio un disastro.
Venice turns from a tourist dream into an underwater nightmare. And it's about to get a whole lot worse.
Venice, like a lot of cities, is built on an old marsh. And it's sinking a little bit every year, maybe a millimeter or two. Doesn't sound like much, but it adds up. And then if the sea level is also rising at the same time, it's a deadly combination for the city.
In 20 years' time, the city may have sunk 3 inches. And eventually, it could be completely underwater. This extreme predicament needs an extreme solution. It's called Project Moses.
We are doing something that nobody has done before.
This colossal £4 billion engineering marvel aims to save Venice from drowning with a system of floodgates.
In such a big job, an ambitious job, because we are working with huge structures.
They are building 78 of these huge gates at the 3 entrances to the lagoon.
La barriera funziona in maniera molto semplice, è costituita da 20 paratoie a ventola e che può sollevarsi molto rapidamente immettendo aria compressa.
When the Adriatic's at high tide, these floodgates will be deployed, blocking the high sea levels from the lagoon. To anchor the gates to the seabed, engineers are constructing giant concrete structures called caissons.
This structure you're seeing, the caisson, is actually the foundation of the gate.
Each caisson weighs in at 21,000 tons and is over 9 stories high. Just moving one of these giants is a Herculean task.
The full operation takes more than 100 hours of absolutely continuous operation. I have spent like 2 or 3 days without sleeping.
Since beginning in 2003, the project is running years behind schedule. Construction teams are working around the clock to make the new 2016 completion date. Meanwhile, many are left to wonder what will happen first: Venice succumbing to a watery grave, or Project Moses saving the day by parting the waters. At 3, it's the sudden terror of Japan's Pacific coast. Millions of people live and work along 19,000 miles of tranquil coastline.
私も同じところに家を建てて。
But these people are also aware that the indispensable sea has the power to destroy.
Japan sits on what we call the Ring of Fire. That means there's a lot of earthquakes.
Earthquakes around here mean one thing: tsunamis. of March 2011. A massive earthquake struck 45 miles off the coast of Japan.
It measured 9.0 on the Richter scale, and it was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded off Japan.
The earthquake triggered a giant tsunami. The crew of a Japanese Coast Guard ship were the first to experience the wave. They were the lucky ones. In the quiet fishing town of Ohunato, local business owner Kenji Sato was in his office when the earthquake hit.
そしてここまで逃げてきまして、ここから多少の津波は来るだろうということで、カメラをデジタルカメラを持ってここに立ちました。
Tsunamis are well known on this coastline. They have been recorded and feared for centuries. But nothing could have prepared Sato for what happened next.
海の様子が少しずつせり上がってきたと。波が大きくなって。
The 40-meter-high wall of water surged inland.
まだ路上を車が走っていたりとか、その車の中には女性が乗っていましてね、そのままどっかに流されていきましたけれども、それはどうなったかは分かりません。うちが動き始まったあたりから、もう私の心はもうパニック状態になって、今あの時どんな風になってきたのかっていうのが記憶に残ってないんです。
While Sato helplessly watched the wave destroy his hometown, 5 miles down the coast, in Rikuzen Takata, volunteer fire brigade commander Yuichi Owada was ordering an evacuation.
最初はですね、
ここら一帯が全部波が引いちゃってそこが見えてたんですよ。海の底が見えてる状態ですよね。で波が半分ぐらいまで来た時にもうこれはダメだなと思って。
When the water broke over the barrier, Owada knew that nothing was going to stop it.
あとはポンプ自動車に乗って逃げたということ。 実際にもう津波っていうのが怖いなというふうに思ったのは逃げ切った後ですね。津波から。
Owada headed to high ground, where he continued to record the destruction. The devastating wave forged 6 miles inland, bulldozing everything in its path. The wave was just about to hit Kensen-uma, where Kenichi Murakami was also filming.
それでもうこれはもうこれ以上もういると危険だと、早く避難してほしいと。で皆さんに声をかけて危ない危険だもう怖いよ逃げろ逃げろということで。 とにかくこの非常階段から3階まで駆け上がりまして、でそこから下の方のまた津波の襲来を移していたという状況でした。これが本当に事実なのかどうかっていうそういう思いがすごくありました。ましてや現実味として本当にあの日に突然襲いかかってくるっていうことは本当にちょっと想像もつかなかったし。
The tsunami claimed 18,000 lives and caused £230 billion worth of damage, making it the costliest natural disaster ever. Japan rebuilds its towns and communities in the knowledge that it could all happen again. Up next, we cross the Pacific for the world's most extreme estuary. Water is a powerfully destructive force of nature. At number 2, the mouth of the Columbia River in the American state of Oregon. A stretch of water so deadly, it's called the graveyard of the Pacific. Here, the mighty Columbia River collides with the stormy ocean.
You've got one of the largest rivers on the continent meeting some of the biggest waves in the world. And where it meets, chaos.
It's a deadly cocktail that in 3 centuries has claimed 2,000 vessels and 700 lives.
The Columbia River Bar is one of the most treacherous waterways.
It's also one of the busiest waterways. Every year, over 3,000 cargo ships must cross these turbulent waters to travel from the open seas to the ports upriver.
You've got currents, you've got shallows, you've got waves. To navigate these safely, you need specialized pilots.
Astoria, Oregon. Specialist river pilot Captain Robert Johnson has an appointment with the cargo ship, New Destiny.
The visibility is pretty bad, so just getting out and finding it and getting on it will probably present some issues.
Reaching the ship may just be a few issues for Johnson, but for most people, it'd be a harrowing experience. This 3-mile-wide river mouth is bang in the heart of America's stormy Pacific Northwest. Where the river meets the ocean, there are huge sandbanks called the Columbia River Bar. These extreme shallows combine with the river currents and ocean swells to create 20 feet high waves. Ships must cross the bar to reach the ports upriver. Only specialist river pilots can navigate them through. And with the new destiny about to hit the bar, it's time for Pilot Johnson to leave for work. The crew's specialized Seahawk isn't exactly your standard daily commute.
Is there anything can go wrong? Everything can go wrong.
There are only 16 river bar pilots. Johnson is one of them. But despite 27 years of experience, he can't afford to be complacent. Out here, things can turn deadly in the blink of an eye.
When it's bad weather out here, that gets sort of extreme on occasion.
The heavy fog means it is impossible for the helicopter to land safely on the ship. Johnson has only one option. He's going to have to take a leap of faith and drop out of the chopper. In 22-mile-per-hour winds, this is not for the faint-hearted. All he can do now is hold on tight and pray that he doesn't get an unwanted dip in the freezing ocean.
Come right, 3, 2, 1, hold position. Hold position right here.
Now he's on board. Command of the 30,000-ton ship is in the river bar pilot's hands. Johnson has navigated this stretch of water over 10,000 times.
We'll be coming in on the main channel here.
With his experience at the helm, it's plain sailing.
The motor ship New Destiny is inbound.
With the ship safely through the bar, Johnson hands control back to the captain. But Johnson's already needed elsewhere. He heads straight off to the next ship, waiting to cross the bar. It's a relentless job for a relentless river. At number 1, we go to the end of the Earth, the icy waters of Antarctica. Like nowhere else on Earth, and one of the most brutal sea lanes on our planet.
It's incredibly hazardous. It's very remote. You are 1,500 miles from civilization.
The danger out here near the South Pole? Sea ice. It may look like it's not moving, but looks can be deceiving.
It's very easy to suddenly discover that your ship is stuck in ice. If the ship isn't ice strengthened, then the ship becomes crushed.
December 2013. The Russian polar research ship, the academic Shokalsky, was breaking through the sea ice of Antarctica's Commonwealth Bay. On board was Guardian journalist Alok Jha, retracing the steps of Antarctic explorer Douglas Mawson's 1912 expedition.
Douglas Mawson was one of the pioneers of Antarctic research, and he spent 2 years in East Antarctica taking scientific measurements. The expedition I went on, the idea was to try and repeat some of those measurements and see how that part of the world has changed in the past century.
On Christmas Eve, Alok and the scientists took one last chance to explore the frozen landscape before the long journey home.
In the morning, it looked like the ice was going to be clear. There was some heavy ice around, but it wasn't coming in our direction.
But the seas near Antarctica are the windiest on Earth. And a sudden change in wind quickly surrounded the ship with fast-moving sea ice.
Suddenly, there was quite a lot of ice around us, big sheets of ice, and that was just a few hours.
Before they knew it, the academic Shokalsky was encased in ice 10 feet thick.
This was old kind of gnarly, savage stuff, which is very difficult to break.
No matter how hard they tried, they simply could not break through the thick pack ice. With the ship trapped, the captain called for help. Australian and Chinese specialized icebreakers diverted towards the stricken ship.
Every morning, we got an update saying that tomorrow, or later today, one of the icebreakers is going to come near us.
But their rescuers never came. The sea ice was just too thick.
The options were floating around the ship that we'd have to evacuate. And the only way to evacuate was by helicopter.
After 8 days of being stranded, conditions finally allowed for the helicopter to fly in to the rescue.
It was exciting, but also you had a lot to think about. You just got on with the job.
Alok and the other passengers were airlifted to the Australian icebreaker 16 miles away.
It just goes to show that as powerful as we human beings are, we're puny compared to the environment, and it's the environment that's in charge down there.
The crushing seas of Antarctica. The world's most extreme.